of examples. I mean, you mentioned some of these experiments that the Soviet government's doing. And a lot of the things that the Soviets take and run with are things that the Russian government during the war had already experimented with. So just to give you some examples, like massive censorship, sort of censorship of the news media, control of information. The Communist Party in Russia under Lenin takes that and goes with it much, much further than had ever been done before. But during the war, you already see signs of that governments, not just Russia but elsewhere as well, but especially in Russia, are interested in what are people writing in letters to each other? What are soldiers saying in their letters back home? What are the newspapers saying? So there's a kind of systematic monitoring and control over information during the war that continues and gets much deeper afterwards. So that's one example, but you can look at economic policy too. There's lots of ways to see this happening.
I mean, you think about specifically changing the way you think as a country throughout that war. When it first started, they weren't thinking the way they kind of did at the end of World War I, right? Correct?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's because at the beginning of the war, Russia, like most of the major powers in Europe, it's a monarchy, and so the idea is that there's a ruler who's been put in place by God at the head of the political system. Now, you may have some elected institutions along with that, but there's this sense that it's right and good that the country is going to be run by somebody who's inherited his position. And in Russia's case, it's the Tsar Nicholas. But then over 3 years of war, the Tsar and his government managed to screw it up. They just can't seem to get it right in terms of how to manage the war, how to manage the burdens on the population, how to effectively fight this war. And so by the time you get to 1917, the idea that it makes sense for the Tsar to run things has really been kind of exhausted. People just don't buy it anymore, and so they're ready for the kind of new thinking that you're talking about. It's not that they necessarily think communism is great, but the old system is clearly broken, and so people are willing to entertain thinking about some other way of doing things.
And David, it's kind of interesting, I'm sure, when I'm thinking, I said, I know we could talk about this specifically, but what you're seeing in the book is a lot of people don't know how the country broke down through this process, because it's expensive to fight a war. And Russia was involved in major parts of World War I. But I think the biggest problem was the home front. Throughout that war, the economy changed in so many dramatic ways. The capitalistic thinking in Russia disappeared. The workers decided, hey, I'm done. We're gonna put down our working utensils. We're not going to listen to this and let big businesses or the monarchy control us anymore. The worker is going to have more power, which hurt because that hurt the economy, and then that hurt how to fund the war, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so one of the things that I argue in the book is that, because Russia has a revolution, but more or less every country in the war goes through these kind of strains. France has big mutinies in 1917, the Irish uprising in Britain's in 1916. So everybody's going through this strain of war. It's just a little bit worse in Russia, and the Russian government's a little bit worse in dealing with it. It's a great story. One of the things that happens is because of inflation, wars are expensive. They cause inflation. Russian peasants, the farmers in the countryside, don't see much point in selling their food. They can eat their food. They don't need money if the money is losing its value. But if Russian peasants aren't getting their food off the farm, then Russian workers can't eat. And it's the Russian workers then, as you say, who end up overthrowing, who destroy the old government and end up putting in power the communists.
Now, you're right. You think about the process of the Russian workers, and that's how that's happened in society. At one point, the workers are just like, we're fed up. We want better wages. But in this way, Lenin's whole thought process, his whole ideology was able to brainwash the masses to understand, hey, now you can have what everyone else has. You work hard. You deserve the same thing as the wealthy people in Russia, right? So that process is being fed into them, and that really kind of hurts morale as well in Russia, because you're having sides fighting against each other. There's almost like a civil war going on while there's another war.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that you see is that the Russian population, as I said, gets fed up. And then the question is, what are they going to do about that? And what ends up happening is, as things get worse and worse and worse, the Russian population gets more and more and more radical. And so it's not necessarily that Russian workers kind of come into 1917 when the Russian Revolution happens, and they don't say, we want the Bolsheviks are what we want. They just end up getting more and more radical. And kind of the last stop on the radical train is Lenin and the Bolsheviks. There's nobody more radical than Lenin. And so as the population gets more radical, Lenin is the one kind of by default that they line up with,
right.
The communists, and that's the party that ends up taking power.
Exactly. Now, I'm sure in your book you talk about Lenin as well, and how Lenin, as a leader, so people always talk about once Lenin leaves power and how Russia changes to almost a dictatorship. What did you kind of portray of Lenin through this turmoil that he was dealing with?
Well, the interesting thing is that Lenin comes into my story at kind of the last chapter. So the last chapter is when Lenin comes in, because you've got the 3 years of war from 1914 to 1917 when Russia's fighting and not doing badly. I mean, not as well as its opponents, but not badly. And that's part of the story that's not really been told. But over time, these strains build up, these kind of things we've been talking about, political and economic unrest that gets worse and worse and worse.
Right.
Throughout all the countries that are fighting. It's just worse in Russia. And then at the beginning of 1917, the Tsarist government collapses. There's a worker uprising, and there's no sympathy left for the Russian Tsar, and his government just goes away.
Right.
There's two revolutions in 1917. The first one, the Tsar goes away, and that's when Lenin steps in.
So
Lenin's been sitting in Switzerland. Lenin's been sitting in Switzerland kind of observing all this, kind of waiting his time.
He's kind of directing things from another place, leading to this big uprising. Gotcha.
Right, and so, I mean, what happens is in the beginning of 1917, the Tsar's government collapses, and Lenin thinks, all my life I've been working for revolution, and it's happening right now. I got to get home. And so the Germans arrange for Lenin to get back home. From the German point of view, great. What's Lenin going to do? He's going to cause trouble. And the Germans love that idea. So they send him back, and Lenin manages to, over the course of 1917, organize and carry out the second revolution that puts the communists into power and then rebuilds Russia along those lines. But it's impossible to think about how he could have done that unless you think about all the damage that the war had done to the Russian economy, to the Russian standard of living, to sympathy for the old way of doing things. Unless you get rid of unless you destroy all that, there's going to be no space for Lenin to step in and try to offer something different.
Well, again, we're talking to author David Stone, professor from Kansas State University, the Russian Army in the Great War of the Eastern Front, 1914 and 1917. And you talked about how much money they're losing at this point, right, David? That based on this war, the turmoil, and it's because the war was at times taking place on the home front in both ways, in the way of the Civil War, but also World War I. Tell us specifically how Russia was losing a lot of its chutzpah and saying that they want to be part of this group of allies. And that's what also people have to understand, that Russia was not one of the evil groups. They were fighting and fighting and fighting this war, right, to try to win.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of the other reasons I wanted to write the book, is that for an American audience, it's easy to kind of lose track of the parts of World War I where there aren't Americans involved. And so America comes into World War I right at the end.
Exactly.
Woodrow Wilson declares war in April of 1917. It's not really until the next year, 1918, which is the last year of the war, that there's actually significant numbers of Americans fighting. So there is this period of time of about, let's say, 8 or 9 months when the U.S. and Russia are allies against Germany. But that's it. So Russia's been bearing a huge burden, and one way to think about it is that Britain and France, so the Western allies, Britain and France are fighting against Germany, and that's it. Right. On the Western Front, on a fairly narrow front from Switzerland to the English Channel. So Britain and France are fighting Germany. On the Eastern Front, which is what I want to talk about, and in the Russian experience, the Russians are fighting the Germans. They're also fighting Austria-Hungary, Germany's ally, and the Ottoman Turks, Germany's ally. Okay. So Russia's going up against three separate great powers at the same time. Mm-hmm. Its economy is less developed than any other in Europe, and so it's more dependent on poor peasant agriculture. It's got less railroad mileage than the other countries involved. And so all the expenses of war, of manufacturing artillery, of feeding the soldiers at the front, when a lot of your peasants who've been farming are now drafted. They're not going to be on the farm anymore. The horses that pull the plows, they're now drafted into the army too, so you've got to still feed your country. Mm-hmm. You've got to find the money to import the war materials you need from other powers. all of these things are huge expenses. They put a terrible strain on the Russian government, and it's just not quite capable of keeping up. And so then in 1917, it falls apart, and then Lenin and the Bolsheviks are there to pick up the pieces and try something different.
Wow. And so you go through all this. And so how close were they when they were fighting Austro-Hungary and all those different places? Was it even in Russia, parts of Russia, the war was going on?
You really start to see violence inside of Russia on a serious level after that first collapse at the beginning of 1917. There's isolated problems before. When the Russians are running short on manpower, for example, they extend the draft to populations that hadn't been drafted before. So Central Asia, the stands of Central Asia, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, those places, the Muslim population of those regions hadn't been drafted into the Russian army. But the Russians are low on manpower. They extend that draft in 1916, and they're faced with this massive uprising. But that's the one example of civil war before the breakdown. But then what happens in 1917, when 1917 happens, the Tsar falls from power, then you start to get really massive violence all over the place. And it's increasingly impossible for Russia to think about keeping up the war when there's so much turmoil on the home front.
Wow. Okay, David, where's the best place we can find information on you? Purchase a book. I could talk to you for hours, but again, only a short period of time.
If you Google David Stone Russian Army or David Stone Kansas State University, my stuff will pop right up.
Well, David, great conversation, and enjoyed kind of catching up with the Russian history, and it really keeps you talking, especially what's going on currently in our in the world powers and seeing what truly is happening with Russia now. I'm sure you're enjoying this and getting the chance to share with people who just don't understand Russian history and understand where we are today and where we're going to be going. And when Russia stay an ally with the U.S. forever, I don't think so. I think we're going to see history repeating itself as well, because certain countries just can't survive economically with a capitalistic system, and it's because they are just used to their history. So looking at history, is that true, David? That's
absolutely.
The way
well,
you can predict what happens next.
Well, and the great thing about doing Russian history is they're always making more, so there's always going to be new stuff to talk about.
Exactly. Well, great talking to you, David, and best of luck.
Thanks so much, Neil. I appreciate it.
All right. So I really enjoy that whole process of talking Russian history. You're watching The Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Andy Amrine, EV True Value Hardware, with the Bethel Park Volunteer Scholarship Fund. This prize here that my fellow producers and I are standing behind is a Weber SP310 stainless steel propane barbecue grill.
We have the greatest stainless steel Weber grill in history. Come buy these $1 tickets right now.
These tickets are available now at multiple Bethel Park locations.
Tickets are available every day, 7 days a week at EV True Value Hardware.
Here at the front desk at the library.
Tickets are also available at BPTV's offices during regular office hours. If the lights are on, come on in. We're friendly, we promise. We'll sell you tickets. Who's doing that?
You heard the locations. I am a location. Come and see me or out in the streets. On my show, you get the talking machine going with buying $1 tickets everywhere.
Mayor Allen will pull the winning ticket during the regular council meeting on Monday, June 8th, live on BPTV.
Thank you for supporting the Bethel Park Volunteer Scholarship Fund. Buy your tickets today.
Or else.
Hi, we're back to the Neil Haley Show, and it's so interesting. We talked Russian history in the first segment, but now we have somebody who's an educator. He works in schools, but I guess when he's a reality television star. So I'm excited to welcome the program celebrity Tom Kersting for now EA&E's Surviving Marriage, which will debut on Tuesday, March 24th at 10 p.m. Eastern. Tom, thanks for calling. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Neil. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you on the program as well. And getting yourself involved in something like Surviving Marriage, reality television, that's a little out of the box, especially if you work at a school right now, right?
Well, school, I mean, I actually have two completely different professions. I'm been a counselor in a high school for 20 years. I'm also a licensed psychotherapist, and I own my own private practice. I got into the TV stuff about 7 years ago. I had written a book, actually a weight loss book, traditionally published. And they hired a publicist, and they got me some, they wound up getting a couple of TV segments, and I found out I had another skill. So this on-camera ability, apparently. So I've been doing a lot of television stuff for many years, and now the latest thing is Surviving Marriage, a new 9-episode docudrama series on A&E.
So you're the jack of all trades, Tom, kind of like me. I television, radio, tutoring, consulting, and then also coaching adults in business and manage social media. We keep busy. Can't just have one thing, it sounds like, Tom, right?
Well, that's right. And plus the family, I got kids. Speaking of coaching, I coach baseball for my son, and so forth. But I'm very excited about this new opportunity. I think this particular show has the potential to reach a lot of married couples, and hopefully get them to change whatever disruptions there are that are affecting their marriage.
So why do you think it happens? Why do you think that in a lot of ways, as we look at the marriage bond, especially religiously, that it's an important that we're supposed to become one unit. We're supposed to let a lot of our selfishness go to have a successful marriage. That people see a different side of it and get involved in it, and then they have no idea that really a lot of their quirks, a lot of things that they did in their lives have to kind of forget about if you want to have a successful marriage in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, it's kind of fascinating because the marriages that are the healthy marriages, couples that you see that are kind of glued together even after 20 years, they know how to communicate effectively. The problem with dysfunctional marriages is in the world of communication. So what does that mean in the world of communication? Well, essentially, the individuals simply don't know how to listen to the other person's point of view, and they get so caught up in their own perspective and how they see things that they fail to open their eyes to understand how their partner sees things. And it turns into just a sort of a battle and a competition that leads to, resentment later on and a destruction in the marriage.
And so communication, so it's key. It's got to be back and forth. It's got to be each person listens.
That's the key, Neil. Listening is the key. Yep.
If you're not listening to theirs, but should you always be trying to fix your spouse's problems, especially if you're a man? That's not a good idea, right? You should just listen. Fix your spouse's problem. Yeah.
Well, the best words for a man is, yes, honey. You're right, honey. No, I'm just kidding. But what's unique about this particular show that I'm doing, that I'm the co-hosting is, Survivor Marriage, it takes couples out of their everyday life, and they're actually placed on a remote island. They don't even know they're doing this for 5 days. So they're up against the elements of nature and everything else, and they're being challenged physically, they're being challenged emotionally and mentally, and all of the problems that have been destroying their marriage are sort of left back home, and now they're in this environment where they must rely on one another. They must formulate some sort of a team dynamic in their time there. So it really opens up a lot of old wounds, the show, through a completely different form of what we call extreme marriage therapy.
So by getting away from technology, being in a remote island, having to communicate, that's hard for people, right, if they're not getting along.
Yeah, it is. And what we did on the for the show also is everything's metaphorical. So for example, on the first episode that you'll see is a couple called Cleburne and April. Okay. And that'll be on Tuesday night, this upcoming Tuesday. Cleburne is an angry guy, okay, and his wife has been shouldering this guy's anger for years. So we start off right off the bat. They get on the island, they're given instructions, but by the way, as you hike your 4 miles to your next destination and get your next set of instructions, here's a 40-pound bag of rocks, Cleburne. And he's got to carry this 40-pound bag of rocks for like 5 miles, so he can metaphorically understand, the struggles and the weight that his wife has been shouldering for all these years. So it's a lot of that stuff throughout the 5 days that they're there. A lot of exercise and activities.
Right. And what about the couples that signed up for this? I mean, we all know reality shows and different things. Was it harder to cast something like this that were willing to put their lives out there, that they have a marriage that could be broken and finished in certain ways? How did that kind of go through that casting process and stuff?
Well, I'm not involved with the casting, but I do know about it from other shows that I've done, and a show like this is definitely not easy to cast because you gotta have two couples, first of all, that really disagree with one another or are pretty much on the verge of divorce. They now have to agree to do something, that's sort of unique, if you will. But it's really their last hope. So with the couples that were cast, the production company really did a great job getting fantastic couples for the show with real issues that seem to be doing it for the right reasons because they really want to save their marriage. And this is their last chance to do so. So the viewers will find out. Each episode is a different couple. They'll find out what the ultimate outcome was, whether they decided to stay together or to divorce.
So, Tom, how did you get picked to be a co-host in this? How did that
work?
I've done.
Well, what happened is, like I said, I've been doing a lot of TV stuff for. I did another show called Monster-in-Laws for A&E a couple of years ago. I have an agent in New York who's who's one of the best Abrams artists, Mark Turner, and so I'm always in the loop for these different things. With these different types of shows relate to relationships and so forth. So I've kind of positioned myself, in the country as the relationship expert guy.
And how did you do that? That's the interesting thing, especially when you talk about your not modest background, but you're not like in Hollywood or anything. You're in a high school plus have your own practice and stuff, but it's not like you're in Beverly Hills. How did you position yourself to have this opportunity?
Well, I think first of all, I'm married myself for 18 years, and my marriage is a solid marriage. I have wonderful kids, and it's something that I really take a lot of pride on and work hard at as an individual, as a parent and as a husband. And as a therapist working with all these couples every day at my private practice, and in addition to all this TV stuff, it's kind of the perfect mix for me at least to be able to really impart some good solid advice to people out there on how to go about doing things the right way in a relationship and in a family.
And they think you're pretty good. But again, to be able to do your own PR, to be able to go out and pitch these things, have agents do all these different things, it's a different animal for sure. So I think you're wearing three hats for sure. You got your school hat, you got your therapy hat, and then you got your brand. And that's getting that out there. And so that's awesome for sure.
Yeah.
Now tell me your experience in Monster-in-Law. I remember that. That was pretty much a train wreck at ways, meaning the stories from that one, right? I remember watching that. Yeah.
That was. That was basically you have couples whose marriage was being compromised by a meddling mother-in-law.
In-law, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's some sort of in-law, yeah. So basically, that was a little different in the sense I would have to go to the location, to where these people were, and really, dig deep into their issues and have them work at coming to some form of a common ground. And it was real hard. Because that was talk about casting. Apparently, that show is one of the hardest shows to cast because now you get not only do you have the couple that's got to agree, you also have an in-law who hates his or her son-in-law or daughter-in-law and is going to agree to do a 3 or 4 day TV show with them to help them fix their issues.
How many years was that? I remember watching that. It didn't seem like it was long ago.
That was 3 years ago. They did 2 seasons on A&E.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, because I saw that, and that was a interesting crew. A lot of them could end up being up on Maury Povich or.
They were on. Actually, the one was
Springer.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one family, the Bojanowskis, they were like the star family for the whole for every out of all the episodes. They were I think the mother is still on Dr. Phil all the time. She's like considered the world's worst mother-in-law.
Do you see yourself, Tom, from here, and you continue to step up with the A&E shows to ever have a show like a Dr. Phil at one point that's big? Is that a goal of yours at one point in time?
That's what I would. You know what? Again, that is really what my goal is. My goal is to get out there more and have like my own talk show where I could reach people from a different perspective. Because basically, the question, to answer your question earlier, like how did I get into all this? It's just really me being me. I'm not trying to be some Hollywood star or anything like that. I'm just being myself and trying to get. Trying to help
Dr.
the
Phil's
world
the same
out there,
way.
help people.
He's not the average, Beverly Hills kind of guy. He tells it straight, just like you tell it straight. That's good. That's important for sure.
Yeah, it's straight. And it's from it's straight. It's from the heart. And I just look at people and I look at couples and I look at families and I say it does. The ones that are struggling. And I'm saying to myself, it doesn't need to be this way. There's another way. Let me show you how.
How tough is it being this? identify when you're walking in the community and there's a public figure and people say, I know you from somewhere, or certain things, you go to a coffee shop, or even when you're walking in your school and say, we saw you on TV. How do you handle those things? I mean, I think that the brushing past saying, I saw you on television, but how do you deal with the semi-celebritydom of being recognized everywhere?
Yeah, well, I do get that a lot, and it's usually people that don't know I do this, like people at the gym, like people that work at the gym that I go to in the morning. Oh my God, I saw you on Fox and Friends this morning, which I go on a lot, Fox and Friends. I saw you here, I saw you there. I didn't know you did that. So I'm kind of just, I'm a little. It makes me, I get a little shy actually, because it's not. I don't know. It's hey, all right, yeah, thanks. I don't really like it, to be honest with you. Like being noticed like that.
Oh yeah,
it's kind of a little.
You're going to be the next Dr. Phil someday, Tom, and you're like, I don't like it, right? But you know what your true mission is, to help others, and you have to go on a platform like this to do it.
I mean, I don't get uncomfortable by it when people say, hey, I saw you here or there. It's cool, but I don't want people to misjudge me either and think like, oh, this guy, just because he does his TV, thinks he's A, B, or C, or D, because I'm just a regular guy. You know what I mean? That's just,
absolutely.
And I just want, want people to kind of feel my energy and understand that they can change.
So everyone tune in to A&E starting Tuesday, March 24th at 10 p.m. Eastern for Tom Kersting's Surviving Marriage co-host. Hey, Tom, again, where's the best place we can find information on you so we can see all the different things you do? Yeah.
Yeah, I put a lot of good stuff out on my website. It's just www.tomkersting.com, or Twitter, it's just @TomKersting, and I have a Facebook page, and that's Facebook and Thomas Kersting. But I put a lot of good content out, blogs, articles, some video clips, some TV stuff that I do. So go out there and enjoy that stuff.
It looks like you like to talk, too. It looks like you could take 15 minutes of your time, especially if you could share to a different audience. I look forward to bringing you on my education show to really go and talk about the education's perspective, especially in your job, and then looking at, in the marriage relationship, how important that relationship was with the children and modeling that, which you were talking a little bit about before. But good talking to you, Tom. Best of luck, and we'll stay in touch, okay?
Thanks so much, Neil. Take care.
All right, take care, Tom. All right, that was Tom Kersting, and that was the Neil Haley Show today. Fantastic show. Two awesome guests, Russian history, and then also Tom Kersting. Have a great week. Next week, another great test. Good day, everyone.